So let's get started. Here I am just clearing up the space where I'll be building. Keep in mind that this floor has a slant to it going away from the house. Now I'm just marking up where I want the cross members to go. These long 2x4s are 12 feet long and will run along the sides. Pre-drilling to prevent any splitting and make sure the screws go in straight. Then we cut up one of the 2x4s for the cross members and screw them in. Always use the same piece as reference. Remember, if you're going to use a piece for reference, always use the same piece. If you keep using a newer piece to mark the next one, whatever the imperfection may be, it's going to grow for every new piece and compound on itself. Screwing in the outside pieces first. All you need is a ratchet strap to hold large pieces under compression. You don't need to go out and purchase a 60-inch clamp or have on-hand pipes and bar clamps the size of a building. If you have a ratchet strap, you can very securely hold some pretty large pieces under compression. Now cutting up and screwing in some back support pieces. Something to note here is that all the structural lumber is on the outside. This is done deliberately to maximize the amount of storage inside. Usually you put the structural lumber on the inside, but I personally like this practice more because it gives this hybrid look between a modern and traditional architecture. Installing some small 2x4s to help in the installation of the heavy crossbeam. Marking up the beam for the rafters. This way you can make sure the rafters run perpendicular to the beam and they sit securely in their little groove. Now cutting up the pillars for the left side of the shed. Everything was planned to reduce the amount of work needed. The center to center distance for these pillars is 4 feet, so a standard 4 foot by 8 foot plyboard fits right in. Now cutting up and pocket drilling the 2 beams that go on each face of the shed and using the same ratchet strap to hold on the beam under compression and making sure both faces were flush. As I was making sure the beam on the back was level, I noticed it seemed a bit off from my markings. So I checked to see if the bottom was level, and this was the moment I caught the thing that's so blaringly obvious through the lens. The floor is not even. So I decided to shim it. I used a little pry bar to jack up the shed and inserted some cut off pieces. In a moment you'll see I added additional lumber at the bottom to make sure everything was well supported. Now I'm cutting up the rafters, which go on an angle, so using the miter saw for precise cuts. Then I use a jigsaw to quickly cut off the slots and use a chisel to take off some material. Now you really should be using pressure treated lumber for this kind of project, but I decided to go with just conventional lumber because I was planning on putting on a really thick coat of paint, and it's cheaper. Cutting up and installing some more cross members for the floor. Now here I'm installing those additional supports I was talking about before. Basically, it's a lot of 2x4s that run along the lumber that was supposed to be the base and are glued and screwed and nailed into place firmly. Now I'm cutting up the side walls that will be screwed into place. These are structural as they will be stopping all twisting forces on the shed. They are there to hold the lumber perpendicular to one another. Works quite well because the torque arm is so large it can easily take some aggressive forces. In go the back walls that prevent any rotation along the length of the shed. Any 4 bars connected have to be treated as a 4-bar linkage. Only triangles are stiff. So to prevent any rotation, you can screw the plywood in such that it prevents the frame from rotating and collapsing in on itself. So everything has a purpose and supports one another. Another thing you can do to speed up your work when cutting is overlay your work on top of one another. Make sure the reference planes and edges line up, and then make the cuts deeper than your material. The extra bit of the blade will leave a line on the next piece, making it easy to know where to cut. Painting the outside walls first because once they are up I won't have the space to paint them. Note here that the first wall I installed already had its back painted. It's a board I restored from the previous shed that stood here. Here I am cutting a notch into the plywood to accommodate for the face beam. The boards are tightly toleranced to create a tight sealed fit, but I still went over every corner with the silicone sealant in the end. Screwing down the rafters now. Before they were just held in place by friction. Putting on the roof now. It's constructed of multiple pieces, cutoffs from the walls, etc. It will be all sealed once the roofing paper and shingles go on. Using a pneumatic gun to nail all the shingles in place. It was a really hot day. You can tell my back is just soaking. I had to get it done, sometimes you just gotta get it done. vacuum the floor before it closes. This is how I put on doors. I've always done it and it works well for me. Just one wooden piece with the hinges on it. Try to get them as straight as possible, and then I build a frame around that. I don't know if this is the best way to do it to have the prettiest doors, but it definitely results in the fastest functioning doors. I was getting a bit frustrated, so sometimes I didn't record. Tip for cutting acrylic panels or Lexan panels like this is to actually run the saw blade in reverse. Take it out and put it backwards so it doesn't have that sharp cutting angle that chips it. It's just a smooth cut. It's pretty much the heat that's melting it away more than the cutting action.